Hello, well, today's April 25th, 2013, and I just have a few things I'm going to go over here today just to make sure that I'm caught up on those things that are concerning me. You did hear in the news, I'm sure, that Senator Chambliss, I'm not sure how to say his name, pardon me for that, I should know, but he says that the U.S., he's seen some intelligence information that the U.S. had a lot of information, many tips on this thing that was going to happen in Boston. Now, of course, with all the ties into the intelligence services and the FBI and the State Department that we know that Tamerlan had, it's not surprising that there were a lot of things going, a lot of chatter. I'm going to mention something more about that in just a minute. Hagel says now, he's the Secretary of Defense, Hagel says that Syria is likely to use chemical weapons. No, I don't think that's the case, but we do know for a fact that the Syrian rebels have, and again, they're backed by the West. It's just amazing to me, how our people can twist the facts, even right in front of us. Say one thing one time, the evidence comes out, and then they turn it around, and it's like everybody forgets, what they said before. One of the brothers there, of course, Tamerlan, in the Boston bombings, the one who was actually the CIA operative one time or another, backed by the State Department, went to a school basically funded and sponsored by Zbigniew Brzezinski. He's a good example of what happens to an intelligence operative that becomes expendable, and they all are. When you have done what they think they can get out of you, there is no honor amongst thieves, and basically he's a good example of what happens to collaborators with this horrible system, this whole military-industrial complex, especially the intelligence side. We already know all of his ties going to Russia, that the Russians blew his cover. That the FBI had been watching them for years. You know the whole story now. And then they end up killing him. They ended up and he may have actually been carrying a bomb, but again, the point is that you collaborators out there, you're the first guys that these intelligence people take out, okay? And I want to explain something else about that too. Everybody says, well, golly, the CIA was looking at this guy. They're bad guys, and the FBI's watching them all the time. I'm going to reveal something to you here that you need to understand, and I think you will when I tell you. A psychiatrist, to stay practicing as a psychiatrist, at least in most states that I'm aware of, has to have his own psychiatrist. He has to go, and I don't know what the periodic time is, but at particular intervals, and talk to his psychiatrist. That's part of him staying board certified, or keeping his license, or a requirement of his profession, whatever. The point is that psychiatrists have psychiatrists that watch them. All right. It's the same in the intelligence community. Intelligence agents don't work in a vacuum. They are constantly monitored all the time by other intelligence operatives. So for the CIA to come out, or the FBI, and to say, "Oh, well, we were watching him," that just proves he's an intelligence agent. If he's not a real threat, a real criminal, or even if he is, it doesn't matter. The point is that they do that even to their own agents. Okay, do you understand that? Intelligence agents are watched. Surveillance is on them by other intelligence agents. That's part of the program. Okay, a lot of people probably don't know that, but I thought I'd bring it up because it's really important. Just because he was being watched doesn't mean that they considered him a bad guy, but they can say that because they monitor all of their agents, all of their operatives, all of their assets. They always do. That's part of the program. The kid there that they had in the boat, you know about the taking down of almost the entire city of Boston. I think it was like 100 square miles that they actually put under martial law, looking for this one 19-year-old. And everybody's saying, well, the officers, they were going into these homes, and we didn't know who the suspects were. You never know who the suspects or their supporters are, but you don't You don't terrorize the whole city to do it. I never did it as a police officer or in the military. This is ridiculous. All right? This was absolutely ridiculous. Let me tell you what should have happened. When they figured out that he was in that boat, they should have gotten a negotiator to talk him out. This is a 19-year-old kid. The fact that they didn't do it that way, shot first and ask questions later, and you know, I haven't seen all the video from the news people, but the reason why they didn't end up killing him is because the news people were watching them. But regardless of that, I don't know that they tried to talk him out, but I'll tell you what, they didn't take a whole lot of time trying to get it done. And to take a suspect into custody alive is always better. Why? Because then you can question them. So they tried to kill him at first, and then they came out, and there's been some, you know, he came out of the boat, miraculously survived that. I'm sure he was shot up a little bit, but nothing lethal. And then the story was he tried to commit suicide by shooting himself. Now, I don't believe that at all. But, you know, then the tracheotomy or whatever they did at that point in time to keep him silent, you know, all of that. The point is, I wouldn't have shot first, and certainly not with tens of officers out there loading that boat with bullets. Negotiation first. So everything about this is overkill. Everything about this is authoritarian, tyrannical abuse of power. It's not the United States of America anymore. All right. You know, I was going to mention something about these banksters and that kind of a thing, but I'll just say it this way. There are two major problems with the United States. Some people out there want me to do a video on you know, how a country gets taken over, and I'm gonna kind of start that here. This isn't going to be the complete one. I'm not even sure if I'll actually get a chance to do it because of the way things are going on here. But there are basically two problems. One is the international banking system. And somebody wrote in a while ago and said, well, do you know anything about the 3 city-states? And yes, of course I do. The Act of 1871 for the District of Columbia, yes I do. And I'm not saying you're wrong. You're absolutely right. And a lot of people won't even know what I'm talking about here. But what I want to get to is something a little more easy to understand. Okay, so you have the international bankers that control things. They're the problem. If you believe in the New Testament, Jesus had a problem with the money changers, which would have been the same thing. The other problem is the military-industrial complex. And I'm going to show you just a small amount of Eisenhower's farewell address. Okay, here. I'm going to put the actual URL in the description box below so you can type it in and go and listen to the whole thing. It's about 15 minutes. But this part of it that I'm going to show you, it takes about 3 minutes, is really the nuts and bolts of what he was trying to say. And I want you to hear it. And up front, I'm going to tell you this. Eisenhower did not believe America should be weak. He believed that we should be strong. He believed in a strong defense, okay? Defense. You know, not offense. Strong defense. He actually ended the Korean War. Okay. He believed in a strong defense, but he was also aware that there could be tyrannical seizure of power by the military-industrial complex that could be used against the American people. And that he warned against. And you know how he said that had to be managed, how that military-industrial complex had to be watched and controlled? By the vigilance of the people. There is no other check. If the people get lazy and don't keep the constitutional chains upon the government, be vigilant, they will lose their liberties and their freedoms. That's what he's saying here. So let me go to that and let you see it.
Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists, and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together. Akin to and largely responsible for the sweeping changes in our industrial military posture has been the technological revolution during recent decades. In this revolution, research has become central. It also becomes more formalized, complex, and costly. A steadily increasing share is conducted for, by, or at the direction of the federal government. Today, the solitary inventor, tinkering in his shop, has been overshadowed by task forces of scientists in laboratories and testing fields. In the same fashion, the free university, historically the fountainhead of free ideas and scientific discovery, has experienced a revolution in the conduct of research. Partly because of the huge costs involved, a government contract becomes virtually a substitute for intellectual curiosity. For every old blackboard, there are now hundreds of new electronic computers. The prospect of domination of the nation's scholars by federal employment, project allocations, and the power of money is ever present and is gravely to be regarded. Yet in holding scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite. It is the task of statesmanship to mold, to balance, and to integrate these and other forces, new and old, within the principles of our democratic system, ever aiming toward the supreme goals of our free society.
All right. And again, you can go on YouTube and you can type in President Eisenhower's farewell address, look for the full version, and listen to the whole thing. It's about 15 minutes. Thank you very much, and I have absolutely only one more thing to say today, at least at this point. How do we fix America? How do we fix the world? You know, they're very anxious to point out enemies. They make enemies for us to convince us that we have to have the military-industrial complex and all these silly foreign policies that contradict each other to protect us, and of course they don't. Remember what I said the other day about how you deal with your neighbor? You speak the truth, and you honor your promises, as long as, at a national level, as long as those promises, you know, aren't done with subterfuge or without the consent of the American people. And even there have to be restrictions, because the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are there, again, to keep the government from going too far. But what I'm getting at here is this. You deal with your neighbor, you do that the same way you deal with other nations. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. A Jewish rabbi said it a different way a few years before Jesus. He said, the whole of the law is this: do not that which you hate to your neighbor. Same thing. So I'll close with that. If we all practice that on every level, I think things would get better.